I tell them, hey, if we can, let's go for a unit with parking, because what you can actually do is either rent out the parking separately or sell the parking spots. In today's video, I'm gonna go down a list of 9 things that, in my professional opinion, from experience and on paper, should be avoided when you're purchasing a condominium in general, but if you're especially purchasing it for investment purposes. Hello everyone, this is Sam from Remax Realtron Realty Inc. And SaberiSixRealEstate. As always, my entire contact information is in the description box. My Instagram, my Gmail, my office and phone, all that. Feel free to get in touch with any questions you have. Many people have been getting in touch, and as this channel is growing, I love to see that I'm actually useful in terms of the fact that I'm informing people while obviously marketing myself a bit. But I appreciate the people reaching out to me for questions or help buying or selling. It means a lot. And also feel free to like this video, subscribe, comment, and review. And part of your review is if you think I'm wrong about something or something I can do better, I'm open to hear. So let's get on with today's video, which is, as I said, 9 things that you should avoid when purchasing a condo. Generally speaking, but especially for investment purposes, these make more of a difference, because some of these things can be overlooked if you're looking to live in the unit and the appreciation of the unit is a second order priority for you, whereas living in the unit is more important. I think I want to clarify that these things are not listed in the order of worst to best or anything like that. Some of them are more detrimental than others. These are not everything you should avoid. These are the main things that came to my mind while recording this video. I might do a part 2 if I miss something. And also let me know if I did miss something I should talk about in the future, and let me know in the comments. One last disclaimer, and I know I make a lot of disclaimers, but I want to be really specific because I'm giving real estate advice and you have to be specific. You can't be general. As much as you can, at least. Point being, none of these in and by themselves are deal breakers, right? So if you buy a unit that has, 1 or 3 or even 4 of these, doesn't mean you're going to lose money. It doesn't mean it's a done deal and you've made a mistake. It could mean that, but doesn't have to. These are just things that I think it's best avoided if you can. Okay. Number 1, only 1 full washroom in the unit which resides outside of the master bedroom. Now, most units that you will buy on the lower end of the price spectrum will most likely have only 1 full washroom, or if you come across a very good deal, or your realtor manages to get you a really good deal, will most likely only have 1 full washroom, maybe 1.5. Now, point being, when the washroom resides, the full washroom with the shower resides outside of the master, so it's not a ensuite master full washroom, whether it's 3-piece, 4-piece, doesn't matter. If it's outside of the master, that really does negatively impact the appreciation. Imagine if you had to shower, but you had to go all the way to the outside, by the entrance, by the kitchen, by the dining, wherever it is, and then walk back to your bedroom. Some people might not mind that, but most people in my experience do. And if you're okay with it in reselling it or in renting it, even if you're just purely an investor, it can impact things for sure. Number 2, useless den space. Now, what do I mean by useless den space? Well, there are a lot of units that are +1s or +2s where the den is not entirely large enough to be considered an additional bedroom, but is large enough to be used as maybe a kid's room, a play area, maybe a little library or a work area, a home office. Now, that is on paper a +1, and also what is a +1 is a very, very small useless den area wherein you just can put maybe a lamp or something like that. You can't really make much use of the space. In the latter case, if you do come across as such for your own financial and investing well-being, you're just better off buying a 1-bedroom with no den, or however many bedrooms. That is a comparative alternative option without that useless den space, because you're just paying more for space that's not going to really bring back much value to you, and maybe adds on a little bit on the square footage, but ultimately doesn't really mean much whatsoever. So that's another thing to consider as well. Number 3, when the parking spot is not owned. Now, think about it like this, right? I tell my clients, even if they don't need a parking spot, especially if they're buying a condo in a very central location, central area where parking is in high demand. Even if they don't need it, they are purely a person who uses public transportation. I tell them, hey, if we can, let's go for a unit with parking, because what you can actually do is either rent out the parking separately or sell the parking spots. I mean, this is one of the reasons where when you're getting into a pre-construction project, they additionally charge on top of the money you're paying for the unit for parking $50K and up. That's not a joke. Sometimes you have to pay $90K for some pre-constructions downtown for parking. And that the reason is because land is scarce for both real estate and parking, and people sell or rent it. You can actually make pretty good money selling your parking spot, 15 to 20K in some cases. So you have to consider that when you're buying a unit without a parking spot, or a unit that has a parking spot but is exclusive, not owned, you can't sell it or reap some benefits from it if you happen to not need it. And the same benefit, transfers over even if you're not planning on selling it or renting it out and using it. When you want to sell it to another person who is going to be the buyer, you can account for the cost of parking in the listing price of your unit. Now, let me explain the difference between owned and exclusive for a second. When you buy a condo unit, certain things are owned, certain things are exclusive. So your locker might be owned, but your parking spot might be exclusive. Owned means owned. It's basically such as the unit. You own it. You can sell it, you can rent it, you can do whatever you want. Exclusive means it's owned by the condominium corporation, but you have exclusive access use of the spot, right? So it's not owned, you don't own it, but you only have exclusive access to it. No other person can use it. It's your spot, but you can't sell it, you can't trade it, none of that. So for sure, I would recommend to keep your mind on this fact when you're buying an investment property. Number 4 is actually the number 4. Now, I don't want to make too much of a joke of this because this is very serious in Chinese culture and certain traditions, but the number 4 is considered bad luck because the sound of it sounds like the word for death. So for this reason, actually, a lot of Chinese buyers, whether it be first-time home buyers, experienced buyers, foreign buyers, domestic buyers, if they do believe in these superstitions, which they have every right to do, it's their culture, it's their tradition, they will not come to your property. They will, and it's serious. If you buy a unit with a 4 on maybe 404 or 304, or even a building, building number 40, in some cases, you do minimize your consumer base for buyers or renters, where you exclude certain Chinese people. Now, this is not a case with all Chinese people. Obviously, if your culture and tradition has certain superstitions, not everyone ascribes to it. But nonetheless, it does impact value. And when I work with buyers, I tell them this just so they know what they're doing, especially if they're purchasing somewhere in a highly dense Chinese populated area. Number 5, if your unit is near the garbage chute. Now, this is a thing that I think might be obvious. Maybe a lot of people who are not experienced with condos don't really think about it, but once you actually hear that, you understand why. There's a lot of traffic happening by your door. Sometimes the tenants, or rather, not the tenants, but the residents who can be tenants and owners of the building are not really good about abiding by the garbage chute laws. So if it's broken or stuffed, they just leave it in the chute. Smell can accrue. Even if you clean it, sometimes the smell stays. It's best to avoid a unit next to the garbage chute if you can. Obviously, once again, if the right deal comes by and everything else is amazing, it's just this is one of the only negative things. Yeah, don't forego this amazing unit that your realtor did a good job getting you and negotiating down the price just because there's one negative. But it's just another thing on this list to keep your mind on when purchasing an investment unit. Number six is similar to actually this garbage chute, the previous one. Number 5 is if your unit is close to the elevator. Once again, sometimes the elevator is loud, a lot of constant traffic happening, coming and going. This is probably one of the ones I would say on the list that is least impactful. I mean, it's not going to affect value negatively that much. I can tell you on the field, us real estate agents do consider it for our investors, definitely so. But yeah, it's just a very minor thing to avoid. Older units with very high maintenance fees. Now, newer units with very high maintenance fees can be tricky, but Typically, if you have a newer unit and the maintenance fee is very high, and I mean very high, like $700 and above, it probably has to do with the fact that it's a very large unit, a penthouse potentially. But older units that were not necessarily that large for the time they were built, they were probably middle of the road or maybe on the larger end by a bit. But we're not penthouses, we're not enormous by any means. They will still have large or rather very expensive maintenance fees, monthly maintenance fees, because they're older. They need more upkeep. And this is actually the quandary with some of these units, is because a lot of people look for size and space, and they don't really build a lot of affordable units with size and space. So sometimes buyers gravitate towards older units because older units are in their price range. But the reason they're in your price range in the first place is because the realtor who is pricing the unit is accounting for the fact that the buyer has to pay a lot of monthly maintenance, and thus the demand is somewhat diminished in that sense, so they just knock down the price to get more people in the door. Try to stay away from older units with high maintenance fees if you can. Not always the case. Sometimes, once again, the right deal comes by, the right unit, you think it's right for you. You and your professional real estate agent have done the numbers to see that this is right for you. Then go with that. But once again, as everything on this list, is better avoided if possible. Now we're going to go from older units to newer units, and this is the next thing on the list. If the unit is very, very new, it's potentially an assignment, or it was just registered and incorporated, and this is the first sale outside of the sale of the builder to the pre-con purchaser. If this is the case, make sure the builder is good and has a good track record. Research that, because sometimes these builders do cut corners, and it can be a very fantastic looking unit aesthetically. From the outside, the building can look new and modern, very good aesthetically. The architecture is amazing, but sometimes, and this is not unheard of, like the granite counters fall off. There's holes, in the floor sometimes, or in the wall. Units start to capsize, which is scary. It doesn't happen a lot, but with builders who cut corners, and especially the very new units, you always hear these horror stories. So really, if it's a really fresh new unit and no one's ever been living in there, and before this is the first sale after the sale of the builder selling it to the pre-con buyer, make sure you do your homework, or your professional real estate agent does their homework, sees who the builder is, compares this building to all the other projects, establishes somewhat of a track record to see if they are trustworthy individuals. Lastly, if your unit happens to reside below the gym or common areas. Now, this can be a headache, because what you'll have is a lot of foot traffic above you, which you can hear, especially in the gyms. People drop weights. Now, it depends on how large your building is, because some gyms are not that populated. Even if your building is, or rather your unit is right below the common area, like a party room or a gym, it probably won't be that much of a nuisance to you, and as a result, not that much of a negative externality to the price and potential selling of it in the future as an investment property. However, if it's a bigger building and the gym is quite large, so is the common areas, such as, once again, the guest rooms and the playrooms and all that, then yes, stay away from units that reside right below those common areas and amenities. This is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax Realtron Realty Inc. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Get in touch with me if you have any questions, or if you need help buying, selling, renting, or anything at all. I'd be happy to chat. If I don't get back to you immediately, I'm very busy, and I'll eventually get back to you, I promise. So thanks for watching, stay tuned, and thanks for your support.